All right, guys, we are live right now, and I have the great honor of introducing Matthew Schutte. Thanks for jumping on board on a Thanksgiving day in the U.S. I don't know if you celebrate Thanksgiving or not, Matthew, but
Yeah, I'm
appreciate you
here
being
in the
here.
U.S., but yep, thanks for having me.
Are you in the U.S. or are you in Costa Rica?
I am not in Costa Rica. I live in Puerto Rico, which is
Puerto
often
Rico.
mistaken for Costa Rica, but it is part of the United States.
Right on. So we brought a leader in the blockchain and DePIN space, and we're going to get into that. I'm the host today. My name is Andrew Lawman. I'm the co-founder of Swift Immersive, and I'm here with Stuart Small from GoHuman.ai. And so the format of this event will be where Stuart will be our co-host. We'll be talking 40 to 45 minutes, and then 10 to 15 minutes for questions from the audience. So feel free to comment, and we'll try to get to all your questions. All right. So from there, Stuart, do you want to share a little bit about yourself and Go Human, what you've done, and then we'll jump into the event here.
Sure. I've been in digital media for 25 years, and in the last few years, we have pivoted strictly to AI. So we've developed our own platform, and it's quite comprehensive, completely autonomous AI agents that, for example, our social media manager agent that can run any social media management, including video production, completely autonomously, listening to the news, responding to current events, and spinning up content in all formats across all channels. That's just one example.
Right on.
So yeah.
Good stuff. Now, before I jump in, Swift Immersive, we get into emerging tech similar to what Stuart was talking about with AI agents, agentic AI, and then coming soon quantum computing, and hopefully very soon Holochain. And that's one of the reasons we brought Matthew onto this this Swift Immersive experience. And now let's get into it. So Matthew, how did you get into the tech space? Share a little bit about your journey and how you ended up where you're at.
Sure. A little bit of an unusual journey. I was a political philosopher, a political theorist. I taught the test to get into law school for a few years. I started a clothing company that focused on making sweatshop free, basically fair labor clothing. In the middle of law school, when I went to law school, I knew before starting I didn't want to practice law. So I knew I was interested in trying to change how systems work, especially regulatory systems, but I was interested in kind of starting and growing organizations that made a difference. I didn't know the word social entrepreneur yet. I hadn't been introduced to that, but that's what I had been doing. But then in the middle of law school, I had a whole series of epiphanies. And one of those had to do with how societies had historically regulated themselves, primarily through informal reputation and people turning towards folks that did stuff they liked and away from people that did stuff they didn't like. And that violence, which is the main mechanism that underpins our regulatory systems today, was never the primary tool for keeping communities functioning. It was always a secondary, at least in terms of the internal management of those communities. But that didn't, this reputation stuff really didn't work at scale. Like, it's when you're living in a 1 million person city and everybody's a stranger, like, I don't know whether I should turn away from you or towards you, or if I turn towards you, for what? And I realized that the internet was starting to enable us to solve some of those problems, like 5-star reviews was making it so that millions of people trusted eBay, right? And they trusted that somebody was actually going to send the shoes on time. And nobody was suing over late shoes. It's too much money to sue. Shoes aren't worth it. The lateness isn't worth it. But it's really easy to go 1 star. And very quickly, people start orienting away from whoever has 1-star reviews. It was actually a functional reputation system, but in this really narrow way that, like, everybody agrees that late shoes is bad. But most of life, we don't all agree about what counts as good behavior or what's more important than the other thing. And I realized that we had a potential to actually crack that, but it would involve redesigning the architecture of the internet. And I was attending law school at UC Berkeley. I'd been focusing also on taking computer science courses and learning about all that stuff, in part because I'd grown up a little too early and a little too poor to have learned how to code myself when I was younger, and I saw that as like a second chance to just at least learn about that world. And by the end of law school, I was like, oh, this is my life's work. Like, I'm going to go try to see if there's a way that people can be able to build upon one another's insights, but not have to have it be a one-size-fits-all, right? Be able to pull down the information from the sources they trust, filter the way they want it filtered, presented in ways that make sense for them so that they can make decisions in line with their values. And some of that was underpinned by this recognition that, you know, the free market as it currently works is incredible, but it's incredible at distributed sense making for one value only, and that's price. If the price of copper goes up, the price of things that use copper go up, the price of things that use those things go up. And at the end of the line, I'm sitting there going, this one's cheap, this one's expensive. I don't know why. I don't know why. It's because the expensive one had copper somewhere up the supply chain. But those costs get passed along because nobody's willing to continuously take the hit and eventually go out of business, right? And so we end up prioritizing, as a global civilization, we end up prioritizing cheap above all else. And it's not that we don't value other things. It's just that the information system propagates that particular form of information well, and everything else, like, was it cheap because they used a different material? Was it cheap because they invented a more efficient process? Was it cheap because they were exploiting labor or not treating their pollution effectively and just dumping it into the river? All of that becomes invisible. And 100+ years ago, there was this recognition, oh, the market doesn't self-correct. And that was when we saw this first wave of kind of socialism emerge really as like a dominant political force. And we saw things like minimum wage laws, worker health and safety laws, pollution caps. These were all, hey, you're not allowed to behave any worse than this. This was an attempt to set a floor that behavior couldn't get worse than, because the market doesn't regulate itself, right? The market leads to really horrible outcomes because we, at a large scale, value only price. This was a bit of a, oh, wow, we have a potential to go after that, like the broader sense-making, distributed sense-making that is really what capitalists have always imagined or dreamed was there or possible, but the information systems were never there. And you know, in starting to go and pursue that, I had to try to crack a bunch of different problems, some of which were, how do you balance privacy with transparency? Because if you have no transparency, then you don't get any of this reputation stuff that enables people to make a decision about whether they should turn towards this one or that product or this person or that person. But if everything is transparent, then nobody is able to actually limit the risks that they are taking in any particular activity, right? Like, if everything I do is constantly recorded and made available to the world, searchable with the latest AI, et cetera, man, I don't even have the freedom to sing in the shower, right? that first time, because I know that's going to be, if it's embarrassing, it's going to be everywhere, right? And so cultural, economic vitality requires privacy. And yet, if we're going to be able to self-steer, we need some degree of transparency. And so there was a lot of grappling with, how do you balance those things? How do you enable communities to bubble up their own balances of those things? And again, it can't be a one-size-fits-all. So that's really how I got here. I wasn't a technologist originally. I was really interested in, hey, our world doesn't work all that great. I'd lived all over the world because I was an army brat. I'd lived in Europe and Asia and all over the US. I was like, man, the world is screwed up everywhere, right? But it didn't seem like it was just bad people over there. It seemed like the problems, the causes really were structural. And that eventually drove me to, oh, it's not the sole, tech is not going to be our savior, but different ways of being able to communicate with one another can open up new possibilities of collaboration, of coordination, of being able to sense, make, and operate in the world. And the hope there was really, hey, maybe we can stop driving ourselves towards a cliff on a bunch of different fronts. right? Whether that's climate change, wealth inequality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Because I don't remember there being a vote on any of those things. I don't remember anybody going, heck yeah, let's burn the planet down. No, those are emergent properties of a dysfunctional system. And so the goal is to kind of enable a slight tweak in communication capacity that can bubble up some better capacities, really, in terms of coordination.
Absolutely fascinating. And wow, it's amazing how it goes from the simple journey into this massively complex conceptualization and ideas and ideation. And, as you can see from the image behind me, which comes from Living Systems, I love how you take all these complex thoughts and have created a framework and put it together in a way that really speaks to the meritocracy of the US, where you can have different co-players coming from each space working together in harmony. And you don't often find that in many spaces at all. So I'd love to hear how you connected with, I think it's Art Brock, right? The other co-founder of Holochain.
One of the others, yeah.
Yeah, one of the others. How you connected with him, how you guys merge these concepts to create a technology that is similar to meritocracy, correct me if I'm wrong here, that allows for different players to come into the space, whether it's Christians, whether it's socialists, whether it's communists. It seems like there's a playing ground here for people to come and work together in collaboration with, key principles.
So I should be clear. The thing that I just shared was kind of my journey in. To be honest, that's not Holochain. Like, Holochain may be a useful component of making that sort of thing possible. But what I've worked on with the Holochain team is related to that. But that was kind of my entry point. Like, your question had been, how did you get into all of this? What led you into tech? And for me, that was really the driver. But about a dozen years or so ago, I had been hosting a meetup called the Collaborative Internet in San Francisco. And a whole bunch of people had kind of come out of the woodwork because they had finally found their people. There was other folks like me who had visions of what was possible with the internet, but the internet just wasn't living up to it yet, right? And eventually through that community, I got introduced to Arthur. And when he started talking about what he was working on, I was like, man, that sounds awfully close to what we're trying to do. But Arthur and his main technical partner at that time, a guy named Eric Harris Brown, who, I'll see if I can find it. He actually wrote kind of a funny book. All right, so he wrote the Internet Directory back in, I don't know, what is this? This is like 94. The Internet Directory, right?
For that.
And at this point, the entirety of this new thing called the World Wide Web fit on 2 pages. Every web page on the World Wide Web, the exciting new, startup in the world of the internet. And so, long story short, Arthur and Eric had way better technical chops than I did or ever was going to have, right?
No doubt.
They are really serious computer scientists.
Mm-hmm.
And though they had come from a slightly different perspective in terms of what was driving them into this originally, I was like focused on how do communities that regulate themselves at global scale and down, and everything below that. They were really kind of starting from the other direction. They were going, hey, how do small communities regulate themselves? How does a group, a church group, a racquetball club, whatever, how can they communicate, steer, do money type things, whatever? How can they do that stuff in ways that are really generative rather than being extractive or oppressive? resulting in a power dynamic where a handful of people really benefit and a bunch of other folks are kind of getting taken advantage of. But the patterns that we had both kind of landed on to deliver on those ambitions were the same. And to your point earlier, Andrew, we aren't really inventing any of this shit. We're borrowing from billions of years of relentless trial and error, where only the stuff that really works over both short and long time horizons is still there, right? And so how does life do coordination? It ain't a two-party system with voting and a president or a CEO and shareholder. Like, no, that's not how our bodies work. There ain't no CEO cell. If there was, we would be incredibly vulnerable at some particular point in our body, right? Instead, you have not every cell, but a lot of the cells that are part of your body, trillions of them, all running the same rule set, DNA, right? And that rule set basically builds up the superstructure of your body. There's other organisms there too, bacteria and viruses and yada, 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 right? That creates the scaffolding and includes things like immune system responses. When something shows up that's behaving in ways that those cells perceive as a threat, including other cells that are maybe dividing really rapidly, cancer, then they get attacked. Those other cells, the ones who are playing by the rules, go, ooh, there's a problem here. And they coordinate their efforts and work to address that problem, right? And so you have, the largest companies in the world have hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of employees, maybe. Your body has trillions of cells coordinating coherently. And we sometimes think our brain is in charge, like, oh, I get to decide. Psh, come on. How many of you have scrolled a social feed in the last 72 hours that you weren't intending to scroll, but you landed there and all of a sudden your body was hijacked by the algorithm? No, this is an emergent process. There's a bunch of layers of sense making happening here that has its shortcomings, but it also is incredibly effective and valuable. And not just I want to notice I said effective. It's not just efficient. In our society, we often put efficiency above everything else, but efficiency always is in tension with resilience, right? The way you get to efficiency is you stop doing things that aren't working, so you can focus more effort on the stuff that is working. But if conditions change and you don't have any other options on the table, shoot, you might just go extinct or broke or whatever that looks like in your context, right? But resilience comes from having a bunch of things available so that when something goes bad, when things go bad, something makes it through, right? And so there's this tension that diversity, you reduce diversity in order to increase efficiency. You increase diversity in order to increase resilience.
Amazing.
And life is full of that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so really what we were focused on with what was then called the Meta Currency Project. And basically when I met Arthur and Eric, I was like, yep, me and my partner, Jared, who was helping me run the collaborative internet meetup at the time, we said, instead of building our own army, let's just join theirs. And there was a few other folks, a woman, Fernanda Ibarra, some other people. They had been going since about 2007 as a project, just like I had. But it was like, okay, cool, let's do this. And a few years later, we decided, okay, the next bit of our roadmap is this thing that we ended up calling Holochain. But you can think of it as a framework, free open source framework for building peer-to-peer apps, meaning applications that run on just the devices of the users themselves. No need for tokens, no need for gas fees, no need for voting. And it's not one system. It's not like the Holochain, like the Ethereum blockchain. No, it's just a pattern. Just like DNA is a pattern. So, Andrew, you have your DNA, and I have my DNA, and Stuart has his, right? Like, great. But in this context, what are we focused on in terms of what we call DNA? Social groups, people building an application to do something together, and what are the rules of that application that they end up mutually enforcing and carrying out, whether it's that they're wanting to do some short text message thing like Twitter, or posting videos, or a currency, right? Like, you don't need to use tokens in order to use Holochain, but you could use Holochain to create currency systems or accounting systems. Yeah, go ahead.
So is blockchain sort of like the VHS and Holochain the beta? I'm trying to understand the nuances with Holochain versus blockchain.
Yeah, that's a decent analogy. It may be. I mean, because I hope at present it has taken us a long time to get Holochain out the door and into the world and working, and beta lost that. Right, beta was the superior technology that ended up losing the race. That's what they're known for. So I hope we're not beta, because I would like to win eventually. But if I were to try to distill it down simply, blockchain is this came out of a community that was really focused on, hey, can we be able to interact without somebody else coming and whacking us with a stick? And that somebody else in general was conceived of as the government. Hey, I want to be able to transact with you, and I don't want anybody to be able to stop us from being able to do that, right? And so the way I think about that is that blockchain was focused on freedom from constraint by others, right? We had a slightly different ambition. It's not that we think that's a bad ambition. That's an important one, but it wasn't what we were focused on. What we were focused on was freedom to constrain ourselves. That we could create a space within which we would step and go, hey, this is the rules of the game that we're going to play by. That we would be able to enforce those rules. That would be able to run on the kinds of devices that we had, the laptops, the cell phones that we possess. So we didn't need specialized hardware or to be paying some different class of people with, fancy computers in order for us to be able to communicate in the ways that we want. Now, why do we have to agree to the rules of some game? Well, that's how all games work. If you try playing chess with someone, but they're attempting to play poker, good luck. Right? You don't even have the same pieces. They're using cards. You're trying to move things around a board. It's not going to work. Even if you try to play chess and they're trying to play checkers, it doesn't work, right? And so, at the end of the day, this is about enabling people to create spaces of communication, of social coordination, and be able to try that out and go, does this work? Is this letting us do what we're wanting to do? And if not, let's try something different and enable them to iterate on that and enable them to join those spaces together should they want with themselves at the essentially the boundary of those, right? In the current internet, we run into other people's spaces. I go to Uber, I come back out. I go to Airbnb, I come back out. I go to Twitter, and then I stay there for a while. And then I come back out. I go to YouTube, I stay there even longer, right? And then I come back out. And every one of those spaces is trying to addict us and distract us and get us to stay and spend as much time as possible with them, spend as much of our time and attention with them. That's a predatory relationship, right?
That's right.
What we're wanting to see is people constructing little ways of being able to communicate with one another that work for them, right? That work for them and enable them to do that so long as they want to keep playing that game with whoever they want to play it with, so long as those folks also want to play, right? So that's the basic gist there.
Mm-hmm. Stuart jumped into the meat of this conversation and might as well just jump into this for a little bit and then transition over to unit. That's how you say it, right? Unit?
It is, yeah.
It's a play on the words there.
Yeah.
Which I like.
UNYT. So it looks like unite, but we pronounce it unit, as in units of account.
Such brilliant thinking. It's amazing. Recently, Tucker Carlson said that Gen Z is enslaved to debt, and then speaks to the evil of BIS, JP Morgan, and others in truly exposing the evil in this world. How does the mutual credit system help them? How does UNIT play a role in helping the parallel economy? I don't know if you know what the parallel economy is. Become the main economy. And I tie that question into this. Is Art Brock in this community Amish? Humor, right? Joking. Like he said that the Holochain community shouldn't speak evil or negatively about the blockchain and the tech in that space. But are you guys being a little bit naive in the sense that this is evil that we're up against, in the sense of these systems that are permeating in this world? And in my eyes, Holochain is that disruptive element that needs to go in and disrupt these systems. And for us to do this, we need to get the leaders in this world, the economies in this world, adopting these technologies in a way that sometimes might be violent, such as in nature. It's a violent act that happens within nature, even within our body, which you've alluded to, and the founder of NVIDIA, what's his name? Yang? I forget his first name.
Jensen Huang?
Yeah, Jensen Huang. He said that the leaders in this new technological age are going to be the ones that understand biological systems, which you seem to be an expert in, which is amazing since you seem to be an expert in quite a few areas. Is there something where Holochain becomes the bad boys of the internet space that needs to go out and disrupt this space in ways that I haven't seen as of yet? And maybe UNIT is one of those acting agents that is going to do that.
So I'll just say, I don't think you have to tear down the old systems to build up the new.
Mm-hmm.
If you make something that is effective, that really works, there's no need to attack the other stuff that's out there. People will just stop using it. Right? I think the other thing that's important to point out is I actually don't think it's critical to get the leaders, the powerful, to embrace this. Those are going to be the last people who get on board, just to be clear. This is, and it's not because this is a threat, it's because the current system works well enough for those folks, right? Those who are powerful today, they look powerful, they do wield power, but I've interacted with a lot of those people. I've worked with a lot of people in governments, in international governmental institutions, etc. Nobody I've ever worked with in those organizations felt powerful. None of them felt free to try new things, really. Because if they screw it up, if something goes wrong, they get blamed, they get fired, there's shame, they get voted out of office, whatever. So there's very little capacity to explore, experiment, to innovate within those structures. But ordinary folks, especially ordinary folks that the existing system really ain't working well for, right? That the existing system has betrayed. Those folks have nothing to lose. So like, screw it, I'll try something. Yeah, let's try communicating this way. Let's try doing money this way. Let's try doing a babysitting co-op. And sometimes that makes use of tech. Sometimes it has nothing to do with tech, right? I live in Puerto Rico. About 8 years ago, we had a hurricane that devastated this island. And help didn't come for a long time. There were people without electricity for over a year, right? Guess what? They didn't wait for the leaders to show up. Everybody sprang into action and started figuring out what was needed, how they could help get it. Okay, there's water coming here. We're going to route that. We're going to try to filter it. We're going to start providing drinking water. Even though the roads are cut off, we can't get to some safer source of drinking water, but we can get to this. And we're making sure we're not going to have problems with dehydration, right? In the 90-degree heat with 90% humidity, right? And so I do think that there are problematic people and problematic institutions in our world, but I actually don't think that those are the source of our problems. I don't think that that I need to tear down those things. Do I think that there may be folks in those places that may eventually feel threatened by Holochain? Maybe, but my guess is it's kind of Sun Tzu Art of War, right? There was advice that Sun Tzu gave about don't let your enemies know that you are their enemy. Don't let them see you coming, right? Like, don't make a bunch of noise before you've already kind of built up the capacity to be able to handle the heat. And my hunch is, even if we were screaming from the rooftops, look at what we're doing, until it's really doing, none of those folks are going to notice. And they're not going to notice until it's built up enough of a head of steam that it's probably too late to stop. Right? In part because it's not a thing. It's a bunch of different communities communicating ways that work for them. And so there's no place to stop it, really.
There's no head to cut off.
Yeah, exactly. It's a far more resilient pattern. But, I mean, I'll say this about the blockchain stuff. I think there are some brilliant people working in blockchain. I think that a lot of the work that's happened there's been big breakthroughs in terms of cryptography, in terms of how can you do privacy, can you do computation in certain ways, and how do we collaborate? And there's really cool stuff that's happened there. And a lot of it is driven by Ponzi scheme dynamics and when will the token go up, and is in general not actually delivering on the ambitions that community was originally interested in, right? Like, I don't see the social change happening. The main social change that I may see is like, hey, maybe fiat currencies start to lose traction. Maybe, right? Like there's a possibility of a switch at the moment from fiat currencies to stable coin type stuff. Okay. Is that the delivering on the ambitions that I heard expressed in the blockchain world through the 2014, 2015, 2016, et cetera, since I've been involved in all of that? No, not even close. Right? There were grand ambitions of communities being able to coordinate and all this kind of stuff, and pretty much all that shit's gone by the wayside. Like, you're not seeing those really gain traction or adoption in the world in a significant way. What has gained adoption is some finance, not shenanigans, but the kind of finance games that banks and other investment institutions have been playing in other forms for a long period of time.
One of my favorite guys is Coffee Mozilla, or I don't know his tagline, but he was the one who kind of exposed the whole FTX scam, and he exposed a lot of these different crypto scams, and just fascinating stuff how he's able to go in, see the scam for what it is, and then starts calling it out before it actually gets exposed. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, there definitely are bad actors in the space. Like, there's a lot of scams. There's a lot of projects that have nothing underpinning them. But there are also people who do really good work. And I'll just call out, Vitalik Buterin from Ethereum Foundation, Juan Benet with Filecoin. There's people who do real work and are trying their best to make the world better as they see it, the way that they see it could be. But yeah, there's also a lot of stuff that's just, scam.
One of the things Perry Kundert says is that, which is one of your guys' I don't know how he would be one of your
former colleagues. Yeah.
Yeah. He says it's going to be like an elevator when, we move over from the fiat system into a new type of currency, whether it be, Bitcoin or XRP based, or hopefully a mutual credit type of system within the parallel economy. But he says if it's on the blockchain, it's going to be like an elevator which goes up to the top floor. You get out, and then the cables are cut, and it crashes down to the ground. Do you see a scenario like that playing out, or do you see a more gradual transition into, the mutual credit system / parallel economy type of reality?
So I'll just touch on mutual credit a minute, because you mentioned it a couple of times, but we haven't really gotten into it. Without getting crazy deep into accounting, alternative currency geekdom, mutual credit is a kind of accounting system, really, that enables people to recognize the value that someone else has contributed by essentially having your account go down a little bit, I'm paying you, and their account go up a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. And the total balance in the system is always zero. You're just recognizing, hey, this person, I guess, did something good for that person, and they've spent some funds with them. So it's a little different in terms of like the imagined physics of it. There's not a token that was with me and now is with you. There's a change in account balance. My account went down this many credits. Yours went up the same number of credits. Great. One of the things that's interesting with mutual credit is the key thing here is how do you manage credit limits? In other words, who gets to spend into the negative and by how much?
Right.
And under what terms, right? And in general, mutual credit systems, when people are able to spend into the negative, they spend into the negative and they don't have to pay interest on that, right? So I may have a negative balance, but as long as it's up to my credit limit, I'm okay. Just like on my credit card, I can, everything I put on my credit card is a negative balance, right? And I can spend it up to the limit. So the interesting thing there is you had mentioned earlier, hey, this generation is drowning in debt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of contexts where people have capacity. They have the skills, they have the tools, whatever, to help a neighbor do a thing, to help somebody else in the community. But maybe that other party also has skills, but neither of them have a dollar, right? They don't have the marker that they can give to the other person that will enable that person to get credit for the work that they just provided. And what mutual credit does is it enables the community to create the markers when they are needed so that you can actually facilitate exchange that otherwise wouldn't happen because it wasn't able to be recognized. And you can do that without having the consequences of what we all currently deal with right now. Every transaction we engage in, there's a pretty significant cut that gets taken out. Whether it's, I was at the grocery store and I paid with my credit card, and even if I pay the bill right away, the grocery store got charged 3%. Right? And if they're dealing with like 5% margins, well, shoot, that was like, they could have had an 8% margin, right?
That's right.
And, so that's really significant. You're talking like 60% difference in profitability.
50% of the net.
Yeah, in order to receive some funds, like that's kind of silly. And on the other side, am I paying 25 or 30% interest if I didn't pay the bill that, before it was due? So our ability to access money is really expensive today. And I want to be clear, it's not that I'm accessing money that bank had. I'm accessing money that bank created for the most part, right? Like the fractional reserve system, banks create money essentially out of thin air. They have to have reserves, but those reserves may be 10, even 5% of the total that they're able to lend out. Meaning, when I go and, borrow $100,000 to buy a house, I'll use 100,000 because it's a round number. The bank only has to have $5,000 on hand to create that $100,000 and then transfer it to somebody else. Well, that's interesting, but really what's going on there is banks have a monopoly over that monetary creation capacity. And some of what mutual credit does is enable anybody in the community to participate in the creation of money, as long as they are playing by the rules that community has set up for establishing credit, right?
Absolutely love it. Fantastic. Now, unit, right? That's the correct way to say it? Yeah.
Yes.
Unit has been established to be able to track these types of transactions. And then does it extend into regular accounting practices? Or is it mutually exclusive to mutual credit systems?
The Unit Accounting is the name of the company. Unit, unyt.co is the website. It is focused on building accounting software, but accounting software that's really about this kind of billing and payments, initially focused on mutual credit systems. So you mentioned tracking. Yes, we're interested in, we are not really all about tracking. We're about enabling your community to track who got paid, who owes, right? So that you can operate your own community accounting, billing, payments system. Is this going to be an alternative to QuickBooks? No, that's not what we're building. We're not building hey, you can track your expenses and you can file your taxes. No, that's not what we're building. What we're building is, hey, your community can manage its creation of money and the billing and payments for services in a decentralized way. That's what we're building. And it's not that we're building one of those. We're building a structure that enables communities themselves to take that and deploy it in their context, whether that's a local community in Minneapolis, St. Paul, wanting to facilitate more local business activity in their downtown business district, right? Or an online network of machines that are doing work on behalf of other people, whether that's training of AI models, usage of AI models, the serving of websites or other applications, et cetera, right? Holo Hosting, one of our sister projects, recently released something called EdgeNode, which basically is a service for that people can use their existing laptop, or a HoloPort is a device we had sold, little computer basically. They can use that to act as an always-on node for other Holochain applications. For if you have a small community, there's only 7 people running your app, right? It's your little, local knitting club or something. And you've got a chat thing and you have another, piece there. Well, you want to be able to use it even if none of those other 7 people are online. And an always-on node makes it so that there's somebody to drop off the messages with and somebody to pick up the messages from. And so we literally just this week demonstrated billing, automated super lightweight billing in Unit for those always-on nodes, those edge nodes. But that billing actually can be used in all kinds of contexts. That billing doesn't have to be used for edge node. It doesn't even have to be used for Holochain applications necessarily. Any machine that's doing work on behalf of somebody else can be billing for that work without even having to run a Holochain application, and then upload those logs, and whoever's running that thing can get paid by the purchaser of those services, whatever those services may be.
Awesome. So could you share a little bit about the use cases that you currently have running through, and how could someone join this? What are some of the advantages of joining such a system like this versus just your regular accounting system? Why should they do this? Why should they jump into something like this?
You ever been to a corner store and seen a sign that said minimum purchase ATM $5 or $10?
Right.
Why is that?
So that they can get their cut. They can see a minimum amount.
Yeah, if it's less than $10, all their profits get eaten up by the credit card charges.
Mm-hmm.
So right there, the existing digital payment system isn't working for retailers. Period. Right? Also, hey, we're offline temporarily. There was an internet outage. We happen to be in a remote location. Can you pay digitally today? Nope. Not at all. Why? Because any digital payment system, whether you're talking blockchain or PayPal or Venmo or Visa, the authority for the change is in the cloud, right? It's in some data center somewhere. If you can't get to that data center, you can't send money to me, even though we're right in front of one another.
Mm-hmm.
But Holochain starts from a different position. It starts from each of us being an agent with the authority to act on our own behalf. And so I have the capacity to authorize, hey, I'm sending you these funds now, right? Now, that will not be recognized by the rest of the community until one of us comes back online and is able to share that with the rest of the community. And then our balances will be updated accordingly by everybody else too. Now, that said, what if you lied? What if I lied? What if I said I had the money, but it turns out I didn't, right? In that offline type context, you're going to want to take other things into consideration. Hey, I'm willing to do this if it's $5 or less, right? Like, I'm willing to do this if it's a party that I know. I'm willing to do this if it's somebody who has reputation in a system that I trust. Meaning, I'm willing to take the risk when there's a context where the consequences for that other party trying to screw me over are going to way outweigh any advantage they might be able to gain by having pulled a fast one, right? Because in that context, you're not able to check to make sure if they really had the money in their account. But they might be able to share proof that, even proof that's signed by somebody that you trust, that they had that money, that they've been participating in the system for years, that they've, they do regular flows of volume, etc. In other words, yeah, they're not going to steal my $10. It would cost them too much to behave badly in this moment. Mm-hmm. So, that's a couple of pieces. The other one is, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of contexts where you want to be able to. Normally, I'll use an example of Venezuela or Argentina, where there's hyperinflation, and gosh, these people still have skills, they still have capacity, but they weren't able to service one another. They weren't able to actually have a viable economy because the money that they were using went into hyperinflation. The money actually ceased to be useful as a marker for the value that had been provided. But I can use a different one. The United States government shut down for over a month recently. Mm-hmm. And you had soldiers and other federal employees all over the country and elsewhere who weren't getting their paychecks. Guess what? Local businesses in the communities near those bases or other federal facilities suffered greatly during that time. Mm-hmm. Why? Was it because the soldiers weren't doing their work? No, they kept doing their work. Was it because the businesses didn't have anything to sell them? No. Was it because the soldiers didn't want to buy those things? No. But why was it? Because the check hadn't been printed yet. Everybody knew the check was going to be printed. It was just a question of when. With a mutual credit system, all those local businesses could have gone, great, we're just going to recognize these soldiers as credible up to, 50%, 60% of whatever their next paycheck is going to be, right? And would have allowed them to spend those credits with one business, who could then go spend those with one of their vendors, who could then go spend it with one of his. All of a sudden, you actually have the economy continuing to flow. Why? Because we've broken the spell that it's impossible to recognize other people's contributions if we don't have this particular form of note, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's just a my hunch is, I can tell pretty stories about this all day long, but it's similar to Uber and Airbnb. I was doing Uber and Airbnb type stuff a decade before they showed up on the scene, right? Lots of people were with Craigslist, for at least half a decade. So ride shares and things like that. And people would go, "You're crazy. You let a stranger sleep in your home when you're away? You let a stranger get into your car? You get into strangers' cars?" And everybody thought that was crazy until they experienced it with Uber or Airbnb. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, this just makes sense. And for the next several years, all you saw get pitched to venture capitalists was, it's the Uber for X. It's the Airbnb for X. The sharing economy became the new business model that suddenly made sense. But until people were able to experience it, it was ridiculous, right? And that my belief is that that's going to be the case with both Holochain and the mutual credit currencies that we're enabling with unit accounting. Once people have an experience of it, they're going to go, this is so much better. Why have we been doing this other stuff, right? And what else is possible? And at that point, it's not going to be, wow, we're a bunch of smart guys. It's cool. We made some tools. And there's a community of brilliant people that are taking those things and using them in all kinds of different, interesting, creative ways.
Fantastic. So before we end the show, which is going to end in 4 minutes, I like to throw out there that we have a $3 million project with a healthcare company. We're looking to raise funds to fund a Holochain project. So reach out to me if you're interested in learning more about what Matthew has been sharing today. So I guess the final question then, we've seen the rise of Vola. We've seen the rise of Hivela. We've seen the rise of some of these pretty powerful platforms. Which one do you think is going to be the one that really starts to break through here where we gain mass momentum in this space? Is it going to be what you're doing? And it's going to be
I wouldn't
just
be
at a
working
local?
on it. I wouldn't be working on it if I didn't think it was a contender. But I think all those projects are super interesting, phenomenal. Ion, Neighborhoods. There's a bunch. Weaver Networks. There's also projects that aren't, Holochain explicitly, but they're run by Holochain former employees. And that includes Dark Soil Studio. There's a new project from one of our former core devs called Cyrus AI. I think @cyrus.com might be their domain, which is kind of like making the use of Claude code better for dev teams. Like it enables people to go, hey, these are the tickets. This is like what needs to be done, and then manages the AI developers more effectively than they currently function on their own. And so there's a bunch of really interesting people, communities that are part of this ecosystem. And there's no way I'm going to go, oh, that one is the is the one. But I do think that the stuff that we're doing with finance, with money, is interesting and has a shot to really break through. In part because it solves a problem that's real that the world has now, including the offline payments thing, right? Like,
absolutely,
like, offline payments just isn't a
business
thing for
continuity
any
is really what you're speaking to, and it's something that I've spoken to quite a few organizations about, and used Holochain as an example to really solve that issue. Now, do you have a Vola phone? Is that something that you personally use?
I do have a Vola phone. I don't use it all the time, but I do use it. I do use it at times.
And are they using, are these different ecosystems using Unit at this time, or
not
considering?
Yet. Not yet. So Unit is still, building its alpha to beta product.
Gotcha.
We've been doing a lot of testing. But it has not yet reached a point where it's, okay, we're deployed and other folks are starting to make use of it. We haven't crossed that threshold yet. Hopefully in the next few months, we will be crossing that threshold. But
nice. And then what about a token? Are you coming out with a token for Unit?
We don't have a token for unit currently. Holohost or Holo Hosting has a token. That's the hot token, which will be redeemable for Holo Fuel. The plan has been to enable hot to be swapped on a one-to-one basis for Holo Fuel. Unit, one of its main focuses is supporting Holo Fuel, like Holo Fuel running on Unit, right?
Gotcha.
So one of the ways you can think about what we're doing is we had to build that infrastructure for ourselves. And while we were doing so, other people started going, gosh, we would like something like that. We realized, wait, let's not just build it for ourselves. Let's build it so that, yes, we can use it ourselves, but others can use it too. And then we can get a whole ecosystem, right? Rising up on top of that or out of that.
Nice. Very good. Well, thank you very much, Matthew. Man, there's so much we could talk about. Hope to have you on again within a year to see how the progress has taken place and whether we're into the new kind of economic reality where go from Web 2 to Web 3 and then that economic reality. So will be interesting to see.
Yeah, it looks like an uncertain year ahead globally, financially, politically, et cetera, right? There's been so much, I'll frame it as chaos, between all of the stuff that's been going on, not only in the United States, but elsewhere, but also the imbalance in the economy at the moment with kind of everything being propped up by speculation on artificial intelligence, solving all problems, and the current forms don't seem like they're quite there, So we'll see where this all plays out, but it may be that some of this gets embraced not because, oh, wouldn't it be nice to, but because it's, oh, we need to. As other systems start to have a harder time. But we'll see. I hope that's not how this works, just to be blunt. Like I said earlier, I don't want to tear down the old in order to build up the new, because that's a really painful path. I'm much more interested in the new starting to grow and get solid and mature, and then the old can kind of start to wither and erode. But if you don't have the new structures in place, it's going to be a painful shift.
There's a saying, and the saying is we can either learn by vision or by pain. And I think, Matthew, you are unfortunately one of the few that learns by vision, and most learn by pain. And I think we're in systems where we have to, unfortunately, do it painfully to get out of those systems, So
I'm going to push back on you briefly in a way where I do agree with you, but I don't think it's pain. I think it's consequence.
Right.
Now, consequence can mean, man, that sucked. But consequence can also be, man, that was so much better. And my example there is when smartphones first came out, do you remember what the application was that really drove smartphone adoption?
I'm going to try
Google Maps.
Okay.
Google Maps, right? And if you had asked...
Yeah, you're right. I was so amazed by Google Maps.
If you ask somebody, do you have a mapping problem? They'd be like, no, I got maps. I have a little Thomas Guide book thing. You've leafed to page 47, right. J6 totally. Or whatever,
Yeah.
But when Google Maps made it so that you were in the center of the map, and the map updated, your directions updated, you went off course, the directions updated. That was so much better than the old version. Even the print out, give me directions maps. It was so much better that it was a game changer. People go, it's nice to have email. It's nice to be able to check, websites and things, but I can't live without those maps. And if I'm honest, the way that I see Holochain is similar. With Holochain, we're trying to put you at the center of the internet. Instead of you going to this application, going to that application, go to this application. No. You're pulling those things to you and combining them in ways that work for you, so that it's functional for you as opposed to you being somebody else's kind of puppet. So.
Wow. Great example. And we'll end on that note. Have a fantastic Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in the near future.
Thank you, Andrew. Take care.